KHOU 11 legal analyst Carmen Roe is here now to help us understand. Let's start with that big headline, the parents not negligent. Walk us through that, Carmen.
Sure. I mean, this is a lot, 33 pages of the jury charge, but the second question asks simply whether or not there was liability in the way of negligence against either parent and or Lucky Gunner. And surprisingly, this jury was unable to find either negligence or that if there was negligence on the part of the parents, that it was the proximate cause of this shooting. And I've always believed that's really where they were going to have to make some really difficult decisions. And remember, the negligence in this case had to do with one of two issues. One, if the guns were made available to the shooter, and then two, whether or not there was a mental health issue that the parents should have been aware of and acted upon and let others know about. So those were the issues surrounding the negligence. But because the jury rejected negligence for both parents, we may never know whether they believed, based on the testimony, that they were negligent, or if that negligence just simply was not the proximate cause of the shooting in this case. And I think that the numbers, both as to the 80% responsibility for the shooter, as well as those really big numbers on punitive damages, suggest that they believe that the shooter was primarily responsible for the shooting.
So that raises a couple questions, Carmen. Who's on the hook for the money that we're talking about? Is it the family? Is it the gun manufacturer, the ammunitions company, or the online seller? Who's on the hook here?
Len, the interesting answer to that question is the only people on the hook now are the shooter, who we know has been declared incompetent and who's in custody, and Lucky Gunner, the ammunition company that sold him the ammunition in this case. And it's my understanding that that company has already settled with the families. So what are we going to see in the reality of money to these families based on the numbers we heard today? Probably nothing at all. And so just like the plaintiffs argued in their closing statements, this was more about a message than money. And based on the numbers and the percentages we saw today, I think that's more true than I ever thought it could be.
So the parents here in some ways avoided being found guilty, but still with all of these damages and everything, does that fall back on them as well?
Well, it doesn't, as far as I can tell, because they were held 0% liable. And so they are not going to be financially responsible alone. And, again, their son, who is in custody, who was 17 at the time, who likely has no assets, I don't know that they're going to be held responsible for him. And so when it comes down to actually getting paid out on any of these big numbers we heard today, I don't think that's realistic. But what I do think is that it was a huge message to send regarding the importance of these lives, both the individuals who were injured, the individuals who died that day tragically. And of course, it gave an opportunity, I think, for the parents and loved ones and the community to really hear more about the shooter, about his family, and about what they went through and what led up to this shooting. Outside of a trial like this, we had nothing but questions and very few answers. And so as hard as it was to go through this multi-week trial, we've gotten a lot more information than we ever had and may ever get as regards this shooting and the shooter himself.
What implications could this proceeding have on future proceedings for Dimitris Pagorchis?
Well, I think a lot of information's come out that would likely be used and helpful in the course of the criminal trial if and when we get there. As I said, at this time, he's been declared incompetent by a judge. He cannot stand trial until he becomes competent. It's not uncommon for him or any other individual to spend time in a mental facility where he is now. He gains competency and then they move forward with the trial. And I think if this goes to a criminal trial in the near future, I think a lot of the information that came out today will be developed even further and give us even more information about what went on in the home and leading up to the shooting that day.
So I'm just curious, it's been 6 years. Pogorczy's has been deemed mentally incompetent to stand trial all this time. How likely is that to even change?
Well, as I said, Lynn, we've had some pretty significant incompetency type issues surrounding capital murder cases here in Harris County. And eventually we get to a place where almost all of them come to a place where we can go to trial with those cases. I mean, it's troubling and it's a difficult issue. Mental health issues at the intersection of criminal justice issues are always extremely complicated. But I think the medical facility is working hard to get him to a place of competency so that he can be held responsible in a criminal proceeding, and so that these families can have their day in court and get justice out of this system surrounding this horrible shooting.
Carmen, I have to ask, you are an expert in law. Were there any surprises with this verdict in the civil trial and with these series of questions that had to be answered?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm really surprised that the jury rejected any liability for the parents at all, because that's what this trial was really about. It wasn't a criminal proceeding. It's a civil proceeding that was meant to hold these parents responsible, liable under a negligence theory for the ultimate outcome, in this case involving the shooting at the hands of their son. And that was wholly rejected by this jury. Peers in that community said, no, we're not going to hold the parents responsible. We're going to hold the ammunition company responsible, but only at 20%. We're going to make 80% of this case about the shooter and his intentional acts with malice. And we're going to assign some pretty big numbers to that to set the tone for how awful we think this is and how much he's responsible. I think a lot of people who watch criminal cases as well as civil litigation surrounding parents and their liability with guns inside the home is something that is changing. But the change that we're seeing across the country, and most recently in a criminal action where the parents were put in prison for allowing their child to have access to weapons when others died as a result, here in Galveston County, that was wholly rejected today. And I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by that decision in our community.
Do you think it's the evidence or the testimony or a combination of both that perhaps led the jury to make that decision?
I don't know that I could say, because I didn't sit in the courtroom and watch all the testimony, but my guess would be, from what I saw and certainly what I read in this jury charge, I think this jury struggled with saying that even if negligent, the parents' conduct was the proximate cause, the but-for cause of this shooting, and that his intentional acts separated them completely.
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's clear that their son has some mental issues. He's been deemed mentally incompetent, and yet the jury decided they weren't responsible for managing that in a way to prevent him from allegedly carrying out this shooting.
That's right, Len. And the question is, did the jury believe that the parents really had no way of knowing and did not know how significant his mental health issues were? I mean, he was diagnosed with 7 different mental disease or defects soon after this shooting. And so, again, we'll never know why they rejected the negligence claim, because it had 2 portions to it. But they heard a lot of evidence about what the parents should have known. But of course, the parents testified that they had no way of knowing, and they didn't know.
Our KHOU 11 legal analyst, Carmen Roe, thank you for your insight. I know it's a lot of details. Again, the parents of the alleged gunman in the Santa Fe High School shooting in 2018 not found liable in any way in relation to their son's actions on that day.